I'm Austin, and today I'll be refuting Christopher Eng's claim that the high school education system is not adequately preparing students for college. His supporting claims are that teaching methods firstly, that teaching methods in high school apply a general teaching type which fails many students in the classroom. Secondly, teachers are hired with unfit backgrounds to continue to teach despite their inadequacy to teach students properly. And third, schools focus on grades rather than learning and development. His first claim that teaching methods in high school apply a general teaching type, he makes reference to this banking method of teaching where memorization and repetition are key methods of learning. The issue here is that not all teachers use this type of teaching. Teachers in high schools are often diverse and exhibit unique styles of learning and teaching. For example, my own experience, my high school AP US history teacher as well as my AP calculus/physics teacher were both educators who exhibited learning and education styles that were fully interesting, engaging, and forceful in their retention of knowledge of their respective subjects. Another thing is that, as well as the banking method, there's a problem-posing concept in which children are taught by engaging in educational activities rather than using this banking concept. According to Don Rye's article, Teaching Methods, educators and their methods cannot be placed under one category or the other, but will fall somewhere in between the continuum of the banking concept and the problem-posing concept. So each educator will find himself placed between these two extremes of educating. In response to Chris's example by Don Cratch from CNN, that nearly half of high school dropouts say they dropped out because their classes weren't interesting, this example lacks credibility because a lack of interest in class may not be wholly blameworthy of the educator, but could also be blamed on the student's own motivation. The same article from CNN, the CNN website, provides a series of other causes that are completely unrelated to the banking method of teaching or the inadequacy of the educator. For example, 38% of dropouts did it because they had too much freedom and not enough rules in class. 43% because they had too many absences and couldn't catch up. 35% dropped out simply because they were failing. This article from CNN gives no information about why students began to struggle in class, but it cannot be solely attributed to the educator's supposed lack of teaching skill. On to the second supporting claim that teachers are hired with unfit backgrounds. Chris claims that teachers are easily granted the ability to teach through the CBEST, California Basic Education Skills Test. The idea that this is the only requirement for a high school level educator to be granted a teaching position is a very big generalization. Firstly, in the name California Basic Education Test, the word basic is used. It's the most basic prerequisite for a teaching credential. Secondly, according to wisegeek.com's article, How Do I Become a Calculus Teacher? It stated, anyone who wants to become a calculus teacher typically will need to complete a bachelor's degree program that specializes in math at a secondary level, focusing on calculus in specific. We may assume that a person with the desire to become a high school teacher will have studied that topic extensively before going into that field of education. Chris's claim that tenure guarantees a teacher their job fails to connect how high school educators are unfit for preparing students for college and is therefore dismissed from my argument. And the third of Chris's claims, that schools focus too much on official grades rather than student learning development. Chris claims that grading discourages students who are labeled by poor grades and puts more pressure on them when placed around students with good grades, which he used mentioning the Asian minority. But this claim lacks evidence and is based And based on my own experience, having a poor grade is a strong motivator to get your grades up. Teaching associate and PhD candidate at the University of Washington, Tony Dokin, says that because of many disadvantages of using grades, attempts have been made to teach without them. However, students were less motivated to study when no grades were used, and grades continued to be used for fostering motivation in classrooms. In conclusion, my analysis of Christopher Ng's claim that high schools are not adequately preparing students for college, I have located and provided information that disagrees with the claim and his supporting claims. I believe that high schools are adequately preparing students for college and high schools because high schools employ educators who hold diverse methods of teaching. Students do not simply drop out because of the lack of adequate teaching from educators, and that educators do in fact need to go through a rather extensive process in order to be deemed adequate for a teaching position. Thank you.
All right, structurally everything's easy to follow. I thought on the first point with the discussion of the banking issue, you did a good job suggesting that teachers are not limited to this. The only thing that I see as being a little bit problematic is you have to rely on your personal examples here. The second piece of information that you had that suggested that there's a kind of a polar opposite and that that's used quite a bit, I thought that that helped that argument substantially. There were some specific criticisms of evidence that the advocate used, for instance, when talking about why it is that people drop out. And I like the fact that you went to the advocate's source and found that there are a variety of other reasons that are listed, and some of which also seem to be pretty substantial. You know, the notion that they've got absences or that they were failing. You know, that contributes to that, and that has little to do with the teachers or the instructional methodologies, and everything to do with the students in this particular case. I thought that that was a good analysis on that particular point. You've had a very clear transition to the second point. You know, I think your explanation of what basic means is pretty fine. The information that says calculus teachers would require a larger degree or some background, you know, I don't know if that's a rule, a procedure, if that's a guideline that somebody who's going into the profession would expect. I think you could elaborate a little bit on that and, for instance, show us in practice what happens, especially in California schools, since that's where the argument is about. You dismissed the tenure argument, but I'm not sure why you've dismissed the tenure argument, about why you basically say that it's not relevant, and I'm going, okay, well, why isn't it relevant? Is it because the advocate didn't offer any evidence on it? Is it because the amount of time that somebody's been there has nothing to do with whether or not the students are going to be motivated? I did think that you talked about the grading issue pretty effectively, and I like the fact that you had some evidence to respond to that point. All right, thank you.